Princess Cora's slender fingers tremble as she faces the colossal holographic display dominating the war room of the Malon Royal Palace. Her violet eyes, wide with horror, fixate on the brutal image of John Freeman, the human she's destined to marry. The hologram flickers, projecting a scene of carnage. John, a muscular soldier with close-cropped hair and a face chiseled from granite, moves with lethal efficiency. His hands, instruments of destruction, dispatch Zyraxian combatants with ruthless precision. Each movement, each blow, sends shockwaves of dread through Cora's body. "Daughter, you must understand," King Zorn's voice cuts through the tension. "This alliance is our only defense against human aggression. Their victory over the Zyraxians proves Earth's military might. We cannot risk war." Cora turns, her ornate gown rustling against the crystal floor. Beyond the war room's windows, Elysium Prime's landscape unfolds, a vision of serenity. Gleaming spires reach skyward, their facets catching the light of twin suns. Lush gardens, meticulously cultivated over centuries, paint the cityscape in vibrant hues. The princess's gaze returns to the hologram. Earth appears as Elysium's antithesis, a planet scarred by conflict. Cities hunker behind massive fortifications, their inhabitants perpetually braced for attack. The contrast is stark, unsettling. The human delegation arrives in 24 hours, King Zorn announces, his tone grave. John Freeman leads them. The marriage contract will be finalized upon their arrival. Panic claws at Cora's throat. Her mind races, desperation fueling the formation of an escape plan. She's oblivious to the potential consequences, an interstellar conflict that could engulf both civilizations. As the war room erupts into heated debate, Cora slips away. Royal advisors argue vehemently, their voices rising. Some counsel against trusting the humans, while others insist on the alliance's necessity. In her private chambers, Cora accesses classified data on human physiology and behavior. Her eyes scan rapidly, searching for weaknesses, for any leverage to avoid this unwanted union. The soft glow of data screens illuminates her determined face. Parsecs away, aboard an approaching starship, John Freeman stands motionless. His eyes, hard as flint, study holographic projections of Princess Cora and Elysium Prime. No emotion betrays his thoughts as he contemplates the diplomatic tightrope ahead and the dire consequences should he fail. The clock ticks inexorably forward. Two worlds, two cultures, hurtle towards a collision course. In mere hours, the fates of humanity and the Malon race will hang in the balance, their future hinging on an arranged marriage between a battle-hardened soldier and a princess desperate to escape her duty. The tension in Cora's chambers dissipated as a chime resonated through the palace, signaling the human delegation's arrival. She closed the holographic displays, her fingers trembling slightly as she smoothed her ornate gown. The time for research and planning had passed. Now she would face John Freeman in person. Cora strode through the crystal corridors, her footsteps echoing in rhythm with her racing heartbeat. She joined her father, King Zorn, at the grand entrance, where they stood side by side, a united front to greet their visitors. The massive human starship descended from the sky, its bulk casting a shadow over the elegant Malon architecture. As it touched down on the landing pad, Cora's breath caught in her throat. The ship's size dwarfed their own vessels, a stark reminder of the power imbalance between their civilizations. With a hiss of hydraulics, a ramp extended from the ship. John Freeman emerged first, his imposing figure silhouetted against the bright interior. As he stepped into the Elysium Prime sunlight, Cora's eyes widened. The holographic projections hadn't done justice to his physical presence. John's muscular frame filled out his formal uniform, which bore the insignia of his military rank. His close-cropped hair and chiseled features gave him an air of authority that commanded attention. As he approached, flanked by human diplomats and soldiers, Cora noticed the purposeful grace of his movements, a predator's efficiency contained within a diplomat's decorum. "Welcome to Elysium Prime," King Zorn's voice boomed, breaking the tense silence. "We are honored by your presence, Commander Freeman." John bowed his head respectfully. "The honor is ours, Your Majesty. We come in the spirit of peace and cooperation." His voice surprised Cora. It was deep and resonant, but there was a softness to his tone that contradicted her expectations of a gruff warrior. When his piercing blue eyes met hers, she felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. "Princess Cora," John said, inclining his head, "it's a pleasure to meet you in person." Cora curtsied, her training taking over. "Likewise, Commander Freeman. We hope you'll find your stay on Elysium Prime enlightening." As the formal introductions continued, Cora found herself studying John more closely. His manners were impeccable, his words carefully chosen. He engaged with the Malin officials easily, showing none of the brutishness she had anticipated. The grand tour of the capital began, with John and Cora walking side by side through the lush gardens. The human delegation marveled at the beautiful landscapes and advanced Malin technology. To Cora's surprise, John asked insightful questions about their ecosystem and energy systems. "You seem quite knowledgeable about xenobiology, Commander," Cora remarked, her curiosity piqued. John's lips curved into a small smile. "It's a personal interest of mine. The diversity of life across the galaxy is fascinating. Your world in particular is a marvel of evolutionary adaptation." Their conversation flowed easily as they discussed the unique flora of Elysium Prime. Cora found herself engrossed, impressed by John's genuine interest and the depth of his knowledge. As they approached a crystal pavilion, a commotion erupted from a nearby cluster of trees. A group of Malins, their faces contorted with anger, burst through the foliage. They brandished makeshift weapons, shouting anti-human slogans. "Death to the invaders!" one cried, rushing towards the delegation. In an instant, John's demeanor changed. He moved with lightning speed, positioning himself between Cora and the oncoming attackers. His movements were precise and controlled as he disarmed the first assailant, using the Malin's momentum to throw him to the ground. The other human soldiers sprang into action, forming a protective circle around the diplomats. John continued to engage the attackers, his actions focused on subduing rather than harming. He deflected blows, disarmed opponents, and incapacitated them with swift, efficient movements. Cora watched in awe as John neutralized the threat without causing serious injury to any of the protesters. His combat skills were impressive, but it was his restraint that truly struck her. This was not the savage warrior she had imagined, but a disciplined protector. As quickly as it had begun, the skirmish was over. The palace guards arrived to detain the subdued protesters, while medical staff tended to minor injuries. King Zorn's face was grim as he addressed the human delegation. "I deeply apologize for this incident. Please be assured that these individuals do not represent the views of our people." John nodded, his composure regained. "We understand, Your Majesty. Such transitions are never easy. We appreciate your government's commitment to our alliance." The incident created a palpable tension as the tour continued. Malin officials huddled in small groups, their whispered conversations betraying their unease. Some called for the cancellation of the alliance, fearing the humans would bring violence to their peaceful world. King Zorn, however, seized the moment to highlight the potential benefits of the partnership. "You've all witnessed Commander Freeman's quick thinking and protective instincts," he announced. "Imagine the security such allies could provide in these uncertain times." As the day progressed, Cora found her initial plans to sabotage the arrangement wavering. John's actions and words had revealed layers to his personality she hadn't anticipated. She began to see the potential for a genuine connection, despite their differences. The sun began to set as they reached a balcony overlooking the capital. The twin moons of Elysium Prime rose in the darkening sky, casting a soft glow over the city's crystal spires. John and Cora stood side by side, their hands nearly touching on the balustrade. "Your world is truly beautiful," John said softly, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. Cora turned to look at him, seeing not just the soldier, but the man. Perhaps there is beauty to be found in unexpected places," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. As they gazed at each other, the air seemed to crackle with unspoken tension and possibility. The weight of their responsibilities pressed upon them, yet in that moment, something new and unexpected bloomed between them. The chime of a bell broke the spell, signaling the start of the evening's diplomatic dinner. John offered his arm to Cora, a gesture both formal and intimate. As they turned to head inside, both were acutely aware that the path ahead was far from clear, but no longer seemed as daunting as before. As John and Cora turned to head inside, the chiming bell signaled the start of the evening's diplomatic dinner. The princess felt a subtle warmth where John's arm touched hers, a stark contrast to the cold dread she had experienced earlier that day. The grand dining hall buzzed with anticipation as they entered. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over the gathered dignitaries, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. King Zorn, ever the tactician, gestured for John to take the seat beside Cora. As they settled into their places, Cora noticed John's eyes scanning the room, assessing potential threats even in this formal setting. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Old habits?" John's lips quirked in a half-smile. "Always prepared, princess. It's kept me alive this long." The first course arrived, a delicate array of Malin delicacies. As they ate, Cora found herself drawn into conversation with John. His questions about Malin governance were insightful, revealing a depth of understanding she hadn't expected. "You carry a heavy burden," John observed, his blue eyes meeting hers. "The weight of an entire civilization's future." Cora nodded, surprised by his perception. "As do you, Commander. Our positions aren't so different, are they?" Before John could respond, a commotion at the hall's entrance drew everyone's attention. Prince Zalor strode in, his ornate robes swirling around him. Cora tensed, recognizing the glint of ambition in her cousin's eyes. Zalor's voice carried across the room as he took his seat. "I hope I haven't missed the humans regaling us with tales of their great victories." His tone dripped with sarcasm. John's posture stiffened, but his voice remained calm. "We're here to discuss peace, Prince Zalor, not to glorify past conflicts." Undeterred, Zalor launched into a vivid description of the Earth-Xeraxian War, emphasizing human brutality. Cora watched John's jaw clench, his fingers tightening around his utensils. "Is it true," Zalor asked, his eyes gleaming, "that human forces razed entire Xeraxian colonies?" The room fell silent, all eyes on John. He set down his fork, his gaze steady. "War is never simple, Prince Zalor. The conflict with the Xeraxians was long and complex. While there were regrettable losses on both sides, humanity fought for survival against an aggressor that threatened our very existence." Cora found herself speaking up, surprising even herself. "Perhaps we should focus on the future, cousin, rather than dwell on past conflicts we weren't part of." Zalor's eyes narrowed at her unexpected defense of John, but he fell silent as the main course arrived. As the meal progressed, a Malin attendant announced the commencement of the traditional bonding dance. Cora's heart raced as she turned to John. "Would you care to join me, Commander?" John hesitated, his eyes darting to the other guests. "I'm not familiar with Malin dances, Princess. I wouldn't want to offend." Cora stood, offering her hand. "Then allow me to teach you." As they moved to the center of the hall, Cora guided John's hands to her waist. The music began, a haunting melody that seemed to vibrate through their bodies. John's movements were initially stiff, but he quickly adapted, his combat-honed reflexes serving him well. Cora found herself acutely aware of John's physicality, the strength in his arms, the warmth of his breath. As they twirled and stepped in unison, the rest of the room seemed to fade away. For a moment, they weren't a princess and a soldier, but simply two beings moving in harmony. The spell was broken by a cry of distress. Cora turned to see a Malin dignitary slumped in his chair, his face contorted in pain. Across the room, other guests began to show signs of distress. John's military training kicked in immediately. "Medical emergency! We need doctors here now!" As chaos erupted, Cora saw John himself sway, his face pale. "John, you're affected too." Despite his obvious discomfort, John moved to assist the fallen Malins. "We need to identify the source of the poisoning," he growled through gritted teeth. Cora's mind raced, recalling her studies of Malin physiology. She grabbed a nearby medical scanner, running it over the affected guests. "It's targeting the respiratory system," she announced. "We need to administer Silex 7 to counteract the effects." Working side by side, John and Cora helped distribute the antidote. As the crisis subsided, Cora couldn't help but admire John's dedication to helping her people, even as he fought against the poison's effects in his own system. In the aftermath, King Zorn's voice boomed across the hall. "This was a deliberate attack. An investigation will begin immediately." John, still pale but standing tall, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, I offer the full resources of our security team to assist in uncovering the truth behind this incident." As the hall buzzed with speculation and fear, Cora found herself drawn to John's steady presence. She touched his arm gently. "You should rest, Commander. You're still recovering." John's eyes met hers, a mix of weariness and purpose in their depths. "There'll be time for rest when we've ensured everyone's safety, Princess." As they stood together, surveying the chaos of the interrupted dinner, Cora realized her perception of John had shifted dramatically. The fearsome warrior she had dreaded was also a protector, a diplomat, and perhaps something more. The night was a long way to go, and as they prepared to face the investigation ahead, Cora found herself grateful for John's presence at her side. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Together. As the night wore on, the investigation into the poisoning incident continued, but yielded few concrete results. The following morning, tension still hung in the air like a thick fog. Sensing the need for a respite from the palace's charged atmosphere, John approached Cora with an idea. "Princess, I was wondering if you might show me more of your world. It could be beneficial for both our peoples if I gained a deeper understanding of Elysium Prime." Cora's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "That's an excellent idea, Commander. In fact, I know just the place." Within hours, they found themselves aboard a sleek Malin hover vessel, skimming over the lush landscape of Elysium Prime. Cora expertly piloted the craft, her hands dancing over the crystal controls. "The vegetation here is unlike anything I've seen," John marveled, gazing at the iridescent flora below. "On Earth, we have rainforests, but nothing quite this vibrant." Cora smiled, pleased by his genuine interest. "Our planet's unique magnetic field interacts with the local plant life, creating these bioluminescent effects. But wait until you see where we're going." As they flew, John shared stories of Earth's diverse ecosystems, from the frozen tundras to the scorching deserts. Cora, in turn, explained the intricacies of Elysium Prime's delicate ecological balance. Their journey ended at a secluded crystal lake, its surface a mirror reflecting the alien sky. Cora landed the hover vessel on a rocky outcropping overlooking the water. "It's breathtaking," John said as they disembarked. Cora nodded, a hint of pride in her voice. "This is one of our most sacred sites. Few outsiders have ever seen it." As they stood at the water's edge, Cora turned to John. "There's a Malin bonding ritual traditionally performed here. Would you like to try it?" John hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'd be honored." Cora led him into the cool, crystal-clear water. "It involves synchronized swimming. The goal is to move as one, attuning ourselves to each other's rhythms." They began slowly, John following Cora's lead. At first, their movements were awkward, out of sync. But as they continued, something shifted. John's military precision melded with Cora's fluid grace. Soon, they were gliding through the water in perfect harmony, their bodies moving as if guided by a single mind. As they completed the ritual, they found themselves face to face, barely inches apart. The air between them crackled with tension. John's eyes searched Cora's, seeking permission. She answered by closing the distance, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was a blend of human passion and Malin elegance, igniting a connection that transcended their physical differences. For a moment, the universe seemed to narrow to just the two of them. Suddenly, the ground beneath the lake shuddered. Crystal formations around them began to shift and crack. John's training kicked in instantly. He grabbed Cora's hand, pulling her towards the shore. "We need to get to higher ground," he shouted over the rumbling. Cora's knowledge proved invaluable as they navigated the unstable terrain. "This way," she called, leading them along a path invisible to John's eyes. "The crystal structures are more stable here." Together they scrambled up the shifting landscape, John's strength complementing Cora's agility. They reached a high plateau just as a massive crystal formation crashed into the spot they'd occupied moments before. As the tremors subsided, they collapsed onto the ground, breathing heavily. John turned to Cora, concern etched on his face. Are you all right? Cora nodded, her eyes wide with residual adrenaline. Yes, thanks to you. Your quick thinking saved us both. As they caught their breath, the reality of their situation began to sink in. John's hand found Cora's, their fingers intertwining. Cora, he began, his voice soft. What just happened between us? I've never experienced anything like it. Cora squeezed his hand. Nor have I. But John, we must consider the challenges. Our species are so different. There are biological compatibility issues, cultural differences. John nodded, his expression serious. You're right. It won't be easy. But after what we just went through, I believe we can face anything together. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent beep from Cora's communication device. Her face paled as she read the message. John, we need to return to the palace immediately. There's been a development. The human delegation, they've been confined to their quarters. You're being accused of orchestrating the poisoning incident. John's mind focused. Zalor, he growled. He's making his move. They raced back to the hover vessel, keenly aware that their idyllic day had come to an abrupt end. As Cora piloted them back towards the capital, John's mind raced with strategies. We need to get into the palace undetected, he said. If Zalor has turned your father against us, we can't risk being seen. Cora nodded, her expression determined. I know a way. There are secret passages known only to the royal family. We can use them to access a hidden surveillance room. From there, we might be able to gather evidence of Zalor's treachery. As the capital's crystal spires came into view, John and Cora shared a look of understanding. Their journey had forged a bond between them, one that would now be tested in the crucible of political intrigue and danger. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their complementary strengths their greatest asset in the fight to come. As the capital's crystal spires loomed closer, John and Cora exchanged a determined look. They landed the hover vessel on a secluded platform, away from prying eyes. Follow me, Cora whispered, leading John to a seemingly solid crystal wall. She pressed her palm against it, revealing a hidden entrance. They slipped inside, the passage sealing behind them. The secret corridors were a maze of shimmering crystal, barely wide enough for them to move single file. John's military training kept him alert, while Cora's familiarity with the passages guided them swiftly through the labyrinth. The surveillance room is just ahead, Cora said, her voice barely audible. They entered a circular chamber filled with holographic displays and control panels. John's eyes widened at the advanced technology. Impressive, he murmured. Cora's fingers danced across the controls, bringing up multiple feeds from around the palace. There, she pointed, that's Zalor's private chambers. The image showed Prince Zalor in heated discussion with several high-ranking Malans. Though there was no audio, their body language spoke volumes. Can you get us closer? John asked, leaning in. Cora adjusted the feed, zooming in on a datapad in Zalor's hand. The screen displayed a complex chemical formula. That's it, John said, his voice tight. That's the poison used at the dinner. Cora gasped. We need to get this information to my father immediately. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the palace. Red lights flashed across the surveillance room's displays. They've discovered we're missing, John said, his mind racing. We need to move. Cora's face paled as she read the incoming alerts. It's worse than that. Zalor's accused you and the human delegation of orchestrating the poisoning. You're all being confined to your quarters. John's eyes sharp. He's making his move. We need to get out of here and clear our names. Cora nodded, her expression determined. I have an idea. We can overload the palace's power grid. It'll cause a temporary blackout, giving us cover to escape. Good thinking, John said. While you work on that, I'll find us an exit route. As Cora's hands flew over the controls, John scanned the room's schematics. His eyes landed on a maintenance shaft in the corner. There, he pointed. That shaft should lead us to the lower levels. The lights flickered as Cora initiated the power surge. Moments later, darkness engulfed them. Emergency lights cast an eerie blue glow across the room. Now, John called, moving to the maintenance shaft. He gripped the sealed hatch, muscles straining as he forced it open. Cora joined him, and they slipped into the narrow shaft just as they heard guards approaching the surveillance room. The shaft was cramped and dark, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees. John led the way, using his combat training to navigate through the darkness. Cora followed close behind, her breath warm on the back of his neck. As they moved, John became acutely aware of Cora's presence. The close quarters amplified every sound, every movement. He could feel the heat radiating from her body, smell the faint, alien scent of her skin. It was intoxicating. They reached a junction, pausing to catch their breath. In the dim emergency lighting, John turned to face Cora. Their eyes met, and for a moment the danger around them faded away. John felt an overwhelming urge to pull her close, to protect her from the chaos they'd unleashed. Cora seemed to sense his thoughts. She reached out, her hand gently touching his face. "John," she whispered, her voice filled with a mix of longing and fear. He leaned in, their foreheads touching. "We'll get through this," he murmured, his voice low and intense. "Together." The moment was broken by the distant sound of alarms. Reality crashed back upon them, and they pulled apart, both breathing heavily. "We should keep moving," Cora said, her voice slightly shaky. John nodded, refocusing on their mission. They continued through the maintenance shafts, the tension between them now palpable. After what felt like hours of navigating the cramped passageways, they emerged into a vast, dimly lit chamber. Rows upon rows of data crystals lined the walls, stretching up into the darkness. "The Royal Archives," Cora breathed, her eyes wide with awe. John moved to a nearby console, his fingers hovering over the alien controls. "Can you access the system from here? We need to compile all the evidence against Zalor." Cora nodded, stepping forward. Her hands moved with practiced ease across the crystal interface. Holographic displays sprang to life around them, filling the air with swirling data. As they worked, piecing together the evidence of Zalor's treachery, John couldn't help but marvel at Cora's skill. Her intelligence and commitment were as captivating as her beauty. "John, look at this," Cora said, her voice urgent. She pulled up a series of encrypted communications. "These implicate several high-ranking officials in Zalor's conspiracy. It's worse than we thought." Before John could respond, a deafening alarm echoed through the archives. Red light flooded the chamber as security barriers slammed into place around them. "No!" Cora gasped, her fingers flying across the console. "Zalor's initiated a full lockdown. He's declaring a state of emergency, citing a human insurgency." John's mind raced, assessing their options. "Can you override it?" Cora shook her head, frustration evident in her voice. "Not from here. We're trapped." As the reality of their situation sank in, they could hear the faint sound of chaos erupting outside the archives. The lockdown had clearly triggered a panic among the Malin population. John moved to Cora's side, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll find a way out of this. We have to. The fate of both our peoples depends on it." Cora looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and commitment. "You're right. We can't give up now." As they turned back to the console, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, the air between them crackled with unspoken emotions. Their shared ordeal had forged a bond stronger than either of them had anticipated, and in the face of overwhelming odds, they found strength in each other's presence. The archives fell silent save for the hum of machinery and their own rapid breathing. Outside, the sounds of unrest grew louder. John and Cora stood side by side, ready to fight for their future, and perhaps for each other. The silence in the archives was shattered by the sound of an explosion. The floor beneath them shook, and dust rained down from above. "They've breached the outer defenses," John said, his voice tight. "We need to move." Cora nodded, her fingers flying across the console. "I've downloaded all the evidence we need. Let's go." They raced through the winding corridors of the palace, the sounds of chaos growing louder with each step. As they rounded a corner, they nearly collided with a group of Malon rebels. "Princess Cora!" one of them exclaimed. "We've been searching for you. The capital is in uproar." John stepped forward, his military training kicking in. "What's the situation?" The rebel's eyes darted between John and Cora, uncertainty clear on his face. Cora placed a reassuring hand on the rebel's arm. "It's all right. John is with us. He's been framed by Zalor. The rebel nodded, his expression hardening. Prince Zalor has declared a state of emergency. He's claiming there's a human insurgency. His forces are moving to secure key locations throughout the city. John's mind raced, assessing their options. We need to get to the communications center. It's our best chance to broadcast the truth and clear our names. The rebels exchanged glances, then nodded in agreement. We'll escort you there, their leader said, but we'll have to fight our way through. As they moved through the palace, the signs of conflict became more apparent. Shattered crystal littered the floors, and the air was thick with tension. They encountered pockets of resistance, both from loyal palace guards and civilian protesters. John's combat experience proved invaluable, guiding them through the chaos with minimal confrontation. They were nearing the communications hub when a stray energy blast caught John in the side. He stumbled, gritting his teeth against the pain. Cora was at his side in an instant, her eyes wide with concern. I'm fine, John grunted, pushing himself up. We can't stop now. They pressed on, finally reaching the communications center. The rebels quickly secured the perimeter, setting up barricades and defensive positions. John, despite his injury, took charge of the defensive strategy, coordinating with the rebels to create a layered defense. Cora made her way to the main console, her royal access codes allowing her to bypass the initial security measures. As she began to work on overriding the communication lockdown, her brow furrowed in concentration. John, she called out, her voice permeated with urgency. Zalor's planted a subroutine in the system. It's designed to intercept and alter any outgoing transmissions. I'll have to rewrite the entire broadcast protocol to get around it. John limped to her side, his hand pressed against his wound. How long will that take? Cora's fingers danced across the holographic interface. Too long, but it's our only option. Suddenly, the building shook with another explosion. The rebels at the outer barricade shouted warnings. They're breaking through, one yelled. John moved back to the defensive line, his tactical mind already formulating a plan. Fall back to the secondary positions, he ordered. Use the hub's layout to create choke points. We need to buy Cora as much time as possible. The rebels obeyed, their movements disciplined despite the chaos. John positioned himself at a key junction, using his knowledge of human combat tactics to direct the defense. The unfamiliar strategies caught Zalor's forces off guard, slowing their advance. But the cost was high. Rebels fell under the onslaught, and John's wound began to worsen from the exertion. He could feel warm blood seeping through his makeshift bandage. Back at the console, Cora worked feverishly, her mind racing to outpace Zalor's sabotage. She managed to isolate his subroutine and began the process of purging it from the system. But as she did, alarms blared across the console. No, she gasped, her hands flying across the controls. Zalor's failsafe has triggered a shutdown sequence for the entire communications array. John fought his way back to her side, his face pale from blood loss. Can you stop it? Cora's eyes met his, commitment burning in their depth. I have to try, but John, we're running out of time. As if to emphasize her point, a massive explosion rocked the hub. Zalor's forces had breached the final barrier. John made a split-second decision. Keep working, he told Cora. I'll lead a team to flank them, buy you more time. Before Cora could protest, John was gone, rallying a small group of rebels. They slipped through a maintenance passage, emerging behind Zalor's main force. The surprise attack threw the enemy into disarray, creating the precious minutes Cora needed. In the heart of the communications hub, Cora's fingers flew across the console with renewed vigor. She managed to override the shutdown sequence and prepare the evidence for broadcast. But as she did, she realized the hub's systems were too damaged for a prolonged transmission. We only have enough power for a short burst, she muttered to herself. I have to choose what to send. As Cora grappled with this decision, the sounds of combat grew closer. She looked up to see John engaged in hand-to-hand combat with Prince Zalor himself, their fight a microcosm of the larger conflict raging around them. In that moment, Cora knew what she had to do. She queued up not only the evidence of Zalor's treachery, but also live footage of John fighting to protect Malone lives. To this, she added her own impassioned plea for unity. laying bare her change of heart regarding humans. With a silent prayer, Cora initiated the broadcast. The transmission burst forth, carrying with it the hope for a new future between humans and Malons. As the last of the data streamed out, the console sparked and went dark. Cora turned to see John standing over a subdued Zalor, his chest heaving with exertion. Their eyes met across the chaos of the hub, a moment of connection amidst the destruction. Then John's legs buckled, and he collapsed to the floor. "John!" Cora cried out, rushing to his side. She cradled his head in her lap, her hands pressing against his wound. "Stay with me," she pleaded, her voice breaking. Around them, the sounds of battle began to fade. The transmission had done its work, sowing confusion and doubt among the rioters. In the distance, they could hear the approach of the royal guard, led by King Zorn himself. But for Cora, the world had narrowed to John's pale face and labored breathing. As she called for medical assistance, using every technique she knew to stabilize him, she was faced with a choice that would shape not only their future, but the future of both their peoples. The battle was over, but the true test was just beginning. The chaos around them faded as Cora focused solely on John's pale face and shallow breathing. "Medics! We need medics here now!" she shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. Within moments, a team of Malon and human medical personnel rushed into the communications hub. They quickly assessed John's condition, their hands moving with practiced efficiency as they stabilized him for transport. "He's lost a lot of blood," one of the human doctors said, her brow furrowed with concern. "We need to get him to the palace's medical facility immediately." As they lifted John onto a hover stretcher, Cora refused to let go of his hand. She walked alongside him as they rushed through the palace corridors, her eyes never leaving his face. The journey to the medical wing seemed to stretch on forever, each second feeling like an eternity as John's life hung in the balance. The advanced medical facility bustled with activity as they entered. Malon and human medical staff worked in perfect harmony, their combined knowledge and skills focused on saving John's life. Cora watched as they connected him to various machines, his vital signs flickering on holographic displays above the bed. "Princess," a gentle voice said beside her, "we need to begin the treatment. You'll have to step back." Cora nodded numbly, reluctantly releasing John's hand. She moved to the corner of the room, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as she watched the medical team work. Hours passed in a blur of worried glances and hushed medical jargon. Finally, the lead doctor approached her, a tired smile on his face. "He's stable," he said. "The wound was severe, but thanks to our combined medical knowledge, we've managed to repair the damage. He'll need time to recover, but he's out of danger." Relief washed over Cora like a tidal wave. She sagged against the wall, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. As the days passed, Cora refused to leave John's side. She sat by his bed, holding his hand and talking to him softly, even when he was unconscious. Her royal duties were delegated to others, her entire focus on John's recovery. On the third day, John's eyes finally fluttered open. He blinked slowly, his gaze focusing on Cora's face. A weak smile tugged at his lips. "Hey," he croaked, his voice rough from disuse. Cora's heart leapt. She leaned forward, gently squeezing his hand. "Welcome back," she said softly, her eyes shining with unshed tears. As John regained his strength, their conversations grew longer and more intimate. They shared stories of their childhoods, their hopes and fears, and their dreams for the future. Cora found herself falling deeper in love with every passing day, her feelings transcending the boundaries of species. One evening, as the twin moons of Elysium Prime cast a soft glow through the medical bay windows, King Zorn visited them. He observed the tender way Cora tended to John, the gentle looks they exchanged, and made a decision that would change the course of history. The next day, King Zorn called a press conference. Standing before a sea of Malone and human journalists, he made a shocking announcement. "In light of recent events," he began, his voice strong and clear, "I hereby declare my full support for the union between Princess Cora and John Carter. Their bravery and dedication to peace have shown us all the true potential of human-Malon cooperation." The announcement sent shockwaves through both societies. Debates raged across Elysium Prime and human colonies alike. Some praised the king's progressive stance, while others decried it as a threat to Milan purity. Amidst the uproar, John's recovery continued. As his strength returned, he and Cora began to explore the physical aspects of their relationship. They discovered both challenges and joys in their interspecies. Intimacy, working closely with scientists to ensure their compatibility. Their first kiss was tentative, a gentle exploration of unfamiliar terrain. John's lips were softer than Cora had expected, contrasting with the slight roughness of his stubbled cheek. For John, the smooth, cool texture of Cora's skin was a new sensation, her natural bioluminescence casting a soft glow between them. As they grew more comfortable with each other, their embraces became more passionate. They learned to navigate the differences in their physiology, finding new ways to express their affection. Each touch, each caress was a bridge between their species, a physical manifestation of the alliance they represented. One night, as they lay entwined in each other's arms, John gently traced the patterns of light that danced across Cora's skin. "I never imagined I could feel this way about someone so different from me," he murmured. Cora smiled, her fingers running through his hair. "And yet, when I'm with you, I've never felt more at home," she replied. Their moment of peace was interrupted by an urgent knock at the door. A royal guard entered, his face grave. "Your Highness, we've received intelligence reports. Prince Zaelor has been spotted in the outer colonies. He's gathering supporters for a potential uprising." John sat up, wincing slightly as his healing wound protested the movement. "We need to stop him before he can cause any more damage," he said, his military training kicking in. Cora nodded, her expression hardening with persistence. "We'll face this together," she said, taking John's hand in hers. "Just like we've faced everything else." As they began to plan their next move, both John and Cora knew that the challenges ahead would test not only their love, but the very foundation of human-Malan relations. The fate of two species now rested in their hands, and they were ready to fight for the future they believed in. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. The coming days would test their dedication, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the weeks passed, John's recovery progressed rapidly. The combined efforts of human and Malan medical technology had him back on his feet faster than anyone expected. Meanwhile, Cora threw herself into the preparations for their upcoming wedding, determined to make it a symbol of unity between their peoples. The day of the grand ceremony arrived with an air of anticipation and nervous energy. John stood before a mirror in his private chambers, adjusting the collar of his specially designed suit. It seamlessly blended human military honors with Malan royal symbols, a visual representation of the bridge they were building between their cultures. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," John called out, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. A human soldier stepped in, his expression grave. "Sir, we've received reports of Zaelor's forces on the outskirts of the capital." John's fist tight. They had expected this, but the reality of the threat still sent a chill down his spine. "Understood. Implement Security Protocol Omega, and get me a secure line to Princess Cora." In her own chambers, Cora stood surrounded by attendants, her ceremonial attire a stunning fusion of Malan and human design elements. The iridescent fabric shimmered with each movement, tiny crystals catching the light like stars. As the final adjustments were made, a Malan guard approached, whispering urgently in her ear. Cora's eyes narrowed. "Zaelor," she murmured, her voice low. She dismissed her attendants with a wave, reaching for the secure communication device hidden within her elaborate headdress. "John," she said as soon as the connection was established, "are you—" "I know," he replied, his voice calm and focused. "Are you ready?" Cora took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Yes, let's do this." The Grand Crystal Cathedral buzzed with activity as guests from both human and Malan worlds filed in. The air was thick with a mixture of excitement and tension, everyone acutely aware of the historical significance of this moment. King Zorn appeared at Cora's chamber door, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and concern. "It's time, my daughter," he said softly. Cora nodded, taking her father's arm. As they began their walk towards the cathedral, she activated her subdermal communication implant. "John, we're moving. Stay alert." In the cathedral, John stood at the altar, his posture rigid, eyes scanning the crowd. The music swelled as the doors opened, revealing Cora in all her radiant glory. For a moment, John forgot to breathe, struck by her beauty and the weight of what they were about to do. As Cora glided down the aisle, her eyes locked with John's. In that instant, all their training, all their planning, all their love converged into a singular purpose. They were ready. The ceremony began, the words of the officiator echoing through the vast space. John and Cora spoke their vows, their voices strong and clear, incorporating traditions from both their worlds. As they reached for each other's hands, a series of explosions rocked the cathedral. Chaos erupted as Zalor's forces stormed in, weapons blazing. In an instant, John and Cora sprang into action. Cora's ceremonial gown tore away, revealing combat gear underneath. John's suit, designed for this very contingency, allowed for full range of motion as he drew a concealed weapon. Back to back, the couple moved in perfect synchronization. Cora's Malin agility complemented John's human strength and tactical mind. They fought their way through the melee, protecting guests and taking down attackers with practiced efficiency. "John!" Cora called out, spotting a familiar figure trying to slip away. "Zalor!" With a nod, John interlaced his fingers, creating a makeshift step. Cora ran towards him, using his boost to launch herself into the air. She somersaulted over the heads of the panicked crowd, landing gracefully in Zalor's path. "Going somewhere, cousin?" she asked, her voice cold. Zalor's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with hatred. He lunged at Cora, his movements fueled by desperation and rage. But Cora was ready. She dodged his attack, using his momentum against him. John fought his way to them, taking down Zalor's guards with precise strikes. As he reached Cora's side, the couple exchanged a quick glance, a whole battle plan, communicated in a single look. They moved as one, John's powerful blows forcing Zalor back, while Cora's swift strikes found the weak points in his armor. Overwhelmed by their coordinated assault, Zalor soon found himself disarmed and on his knees. As the last of Zalor's forces were subdued, silence fell over the cathedral. John and Cora stood victorious, their wedding attire in tatters, but their commitment unshaken. They turned to face the assembled guests, many of whom had witnessed their incredible teamwork firsthand. A moment of stunned silence was broken by a single clap, then another, until the entire cathedral erupted in thunderous applause. The broadcast cameras, which had captured every moment of the battle, continued to roll, transmitting this powerful image of unity across the galaxy. Amidst the cheering crowd, John took Cora's hand. "I believe," he said with a smile, "we were in the middle of something." Cora laughed, her eyes shining with love and triumph. "Indeed we were." As the guests settled back into their seats, some sporting minor injuries from the battle, John and Cora returned to the altar. Standing amidst the rubble, they completed their vows, their words carrying even more weight after the ordeal they had just faced together. King Zorn stepped forward, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you united in marriage and joint ambassadors of the Human Malon Alliance." John and Cora's kiss, broadcast across the stars, became an instant symbol of love transcending all boundaries. As they broke apart, both knew that this was just the beginning of their journey together. Hand in hand, they turned to face their future, ready to build a bridge between their worlds, stronger than any force that might try to tear it down.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.